Hi everyone, Stepan here. Today I'm going to share my English opening repertoire with you, and this isn't going to be a theoretical video. If you want the theory on every variation you're about to see, I've made a huge playlist on the English. You can find it below in the comments and in the description. Today I'm going to be focusing on setups, ideas, patterns, and things that are going to make it easier to play the English after a very short learning time. So I'm going to show you several things we're going to try to do as white to play the English effectively, regardless of what our opponent plays. The entire English opening repertoire is available on Nocti, so studying an opening by just going through theoretical lines, it's not useless, but it's very hard to make any significant progress, to gain experience and to actually learn an opening. The best way to do it is to develop a skill and to gain experience in the opening. So you should find a sparring partner who's willing to play against your English over and over again. Most humans don't want to do that, so you can use Nocti. Nocti is a human-like AI, and I've inserted this repertoire. You can create as many as you want. As you can see, I've created a million repertoires on Nocti. I use it to study my openings and then play games. So select Nocti's difficulty. I want to play white, and let's play. So Nocti is going to be giving you immediate feedback. It's going to mix things up. It's going to play different lines every time. Okay, it plays the Dutch. There are many other features on Nocti you can use. My favorite probably is themes, so you can create any custom set of positions. As you can see, I do that for almost every tournament game I prepare for, and then practice those against Nocti as well. Check out Nocti, the link is in the description. If you decide to go premium, use the code Hanging Pawns to get a massive 64% discount. The English repertoire is also available in the shop on my Patreon page, alongside probably more than 30 other repertoires now. I just did the Dutch and the Bird, QGD for Black, Nimzo for Black, how to beat the King's Indian, how to play the King's Indian. I did E4, D4, King's Gambit, Sicilian, Spanish, Italian, Caro-Kann, my updated Caro-Kann repertoire, French, and so on. You can buy each repertoire separately, or you can help support the channel, join my Patreon page for just $4 a month and gain access to all of these, as well as 500 other posts. Before we start, I want to say that the English is, in my opinion, by far the most flexible first move for white, because even though black can play e5, which is technically a Sicilian in reverse, black can play c5 symmetrically, black can play e6 trying to play the Queen's Gambit, or c6 trying to play the Slav semi-Slav setups, or they can just play flexibly with knight f6. White is the one who determines the nature of the position against everything, basically. Because as white, after the English, after c4, whatever black plays, you have several viable setups. They include d4, transposing to normal Queen's Gambit lines, g3 playing a kingside fianchetto, b3 playing Garetti sort of system, not playing a fianchetto at all, playing with knight c3 and knight f3, playing with e3 and d4. There are many things you can do. So when you choose to play the English, you can look forward to choosing the type of pawn structure you enjoy playing. So we're going to go through 8 most common first moves for black and the setups that they signal are going to be played by black or attempted to be played by black. I should say many of these, and that's the second point I want to make, many of these are going to transpose. And if black plays knight f6 on move 1 or e6 or c5, we could get the same opening. If they play g6 or knight f6, we could get the same opening setup for them. If they play d6 or g6 or knight f6, we could get the same opening setup. So you have to be ready for transpositions, and you have to be ready for changes in the pawn structure. And my third point, therefore, is that I've come to believe that the English may be the best opening for your development, because you're forced to play every single pawn structure and you're forced to adapt to what black is doing. Whereas if you play e4, black plays e5 and you get a Spanish, then, you know, you're going to be playing the Spanish. There isn't much you can do to deviate. So let's begin. First of all, let's deal with e5. So this is a Sicilian, a tempo up for white. And imagine, I don't know if you've ever played the Sicilian with black, but you could conceivably play any sort of Sicilian you play with black with white. So you could play knight c3 here, you could play d3 here, you could play g3, you could play e4, you could play whatever you want. I've chosen a setup that begins with g3, and we're going to be playing g3 against almost everything. There will be a few exceptions, and our plan will be as follows. Our plan is to have a bishop on g2, put pressure on the queen side, and expand with b4. In most cases, we are going to be attempting to play b4 and putting pressure on the queen side. So, of course, depending on what black does. All of this theory is in the repertoire you can find below. There are a million lines here, but again, I'm going to try to explain the ideas. So, say black plays knight f6. There are other moves, but this is just a normal open Sicilian attempt. So, you know, technically a hyper-accelerated dragon. White goes bishop g2, and black plays d5. So after e4, c5, knight f3, g6, d4 is the hyper-accelerated dragon. This is just a tempo up for white. So what happens in the Sicilian is that white exchanges the c-pawn, or in the normal Sicilian, black exchanges the c-pawn for the d-pawn. And once this trade is made, you can see that, in this case, white has a pawn majority in the center. That means that most endgames are going to be easier for white to play because they're going to have more central control. Most middle game positions are, if you play this with black, kind of tricky because white gets their English attack setup, standard English attack setup. Black, on the other hand, cannot do that easily. So if we can imagine black in this case attempting to play bishop e6 and queen d7 and f6 and, you know, castling queenside, that's not going to happen. There isn't enough time for that. So you could say that playing g3 against e5 leads to dragon positions that are more favorable for white because black cannot get the standard English attack type setup. So we play knight c3, and if black chooses to trade, and they can, that would be, in my opinion, a mistake. If they play knight takes c3, we play b takes c3. And now we're going to play d4. This is something you should remember. When knight c3 is played, always play b c3. Because you're going to have a broad center. Now we have 3 central pawns against, well, 2. And d4 cannot be prevented anymore. So knight c3, most people are just going to move the knight back. The most common move is knight b6. And now when we play knight f3, say knight c6, castles, where is the attack? There is no attack. This is a dragon without the downside of being stormed on the king side. So say bishop e7, a3. What do we want to do? We want to play b4. And again, in many cases, these lines could transpose from other first moves for black, but this is what we're trying to do. So let's say castles, b4, bishop e6, rook b1, supporting the pawn. We are basically anticipating a5, and we don't want our rook to be trapped and pinned. So a very common mistake one could make here, let's say h3, a5. Now the rook is hanging, the pawn is hanging, and black is much better, if not winning already. There isn't much you can do here except play b5, but once you play b5, then there's knight d4, and everything is falling apart. So remember this pattern. Rook b1. Okay, so now the rook isn't hanging, and let's say f6, d3, a5. We can now simply continue with b5. And after knight d4, we aren't forced to do anything. Everything is defended. Everything is fine. And we're going to play a very, very typical plan here, which I would like to teach you. We want to put pressure on these 2 pawns, basically. The pawn on b5 helps, and therefore we play knight d2. And black has many moves. Let's say queen c8. e3 chasing the knight away. And eventually, we want to put this knight on c4 when we're able to put it on c4, and we're also putting pressure on on b7. And c6, of course, is very difficult to play because we could take, and the knight could be hanging. In this case, c6 just loses material because c6, bc6, the knight hangs, the pawn cannot be recaptured. So this is what we do against e5. I've included many different lines here. After g3, black, of course, does not have to play knight f6. They could play c6, for example, strengthening d5. So this would be the Alapin, technically. Bishop g2, d5, cd, cd. In this case, I like playing d4 and getting the structure where we have, I like to call it a good French structure in reverse. After knight c3, knight c6, we're constantly going to have pressure on the pawn on d5, and white's going to have to be careful. e3 is sort of the only thing we have to be worried about. And there are other lines after e5, but again, you can find them in the repertoire. Our basic setup is a dragon in reverse. That's all you have to know. Okay, the symmetrical English. So after c4, c5, it's obvious that black doesn't wish to allow any imbalances in the position. And we are nevertheless going to try to create some. Two main plans here. So first of all, we go g3. There are many things black can do here. One of them, probably the most popular one, unless black goes for the exact symmetry, is the Rubinstein variation, where they play knight f6, and on bishop g2 they play d5. And I think this might be the critical way to play the symmetrical English for black. cd5, knight d5, knight c3. Again, if they trade, we just take with the b pawn, we're going to play d4, so that's no good. So they play knight c7. And the idea behind this is black is going to have two very good knights on c6 and c7, and they're going to play e5, creating a sort of Marozzi bind. And we're basically playing the dragon against the Marozzi bind. It's what it is. So when you play the Marozzi bind, and I usually have it as white against the Sicilian, it's very hard to do anything for either side. So after something like bishop e7, we have to start doing things straight away. Since we're up a tempo and black hasn't castled yet, making a relatively passive move like a3, nah. So we play knight d2. Now the idea behind knight d2 is I want to take on c6. I don't care what you do, but let's just say black castles. We take on c6, bc6, and knight c4. I actually had a game against a teammate, Juraj, yesterday where we had this exact structure. Luckily for him, I didn't have a pawn on d3, and he managed to put a rook on d4 and was equal. I won, but it was tough. So this structure is very bad, needless to say. Therefore, after knight d2, black needs to start defending straight away. First of all, bishop d7 is the best move, and it's a suboptimal square. The bishop really wishes to be on e6 so that the queen could go to d7. In this case, the queen's going to have to go to c8. So something like knight c4, f6. Again, black hasn't castled yet. So a normal Marozzi bind plan where, and again, I had this with white many times, black structure, doesn't really work. We can strike straight away. The knight isn't blocking our f-pawn, so f4. And black is sort of falling apart. If black doesn't do anything, let's say black makes a passive move, queen c8, we take. If they take with the knight, they're never castling. This bishop is a monster. This bishop is amazing. The queen's coming to b3. There's going to be trouble on f7, and black is basically losing. So after f4, black needs to play dynamically. So they play b5 and knight e3. You can see another idea behind this knight d2, knight c4 maneuver, controlling the d5 square. And in many cases, that's going to become very, very useful, putting a knight on d5 when your opponent has pawns on c5 and e5, meaning no pawns on adjacent files that could chase it away. The knight could become the best piece on the board. For example, ef, gf. Don't be afraid to take gf. There's no attack happening. Rook b8, knight d5. It's a good knight. So this is something we're trying to get, and this is after best play by black. So after c5, we play g3. Knight f6, the Rubinstein, is one of the ways for black to play. The second way for black to play is the so-called Botvinnik system. And this is going to apply to one g6, in some cases one knight f6, and in almost all cases one d6 as well. The Botvinnik system is characterized by pawns on e4, c4, d3, bishop on g2, knights on c3, e2. And you're playing for, well, three things, depending on what black does. Either the b4 break, the d4 break, or the f4 break. It's a very simple position to play. So let's say they start with g6. We play bishop g2, they go bishop g7, knight c3, knight c6. In this case, we could play d3 straight away. Okay, they go, I don't know, d6, we go e4, they go, say, knight f6, knight g2, castles, castles. We have the Botvinnik system. And in this type of position, it's clear that both sides have to play for a pawn break to change the nature of the position. Black could also choose to put a pawn on e5. I don't think that's good. There's no reason to do that. You want to keep things flexible, and black should keep controlling the d5 square. But white does have to do something in order to make progress here. There are a couple of ideas. Again, you can play for a3, rook b1, b4. You can play for d4, or you can play for f4, f5. One of the main things about the Botvinnik is that it's very safe, and it's very hard for black to counter it, and it's very hard to lose as white. There are many patterns here. For example, if you want to go bishop e3 and queen d2, you should preface that with h3 to prevent knight g4, stuff like that. So for example, black plays a6, they play for b5 as well. For the moment, it's been prevented, so we can continue with our development h3, rook b8, they really want to play b5, so now we have to play a4. Notice that we've given away the b4 square, but that's not such a big deal. You have to, we had to give away a square to prevent b5. Knight e8, what's black doing? Well, black is targeting the d4 square. Remember what we did in the previous chapter where we were trying to, or in the Rubinstein, where we were trying to get the knight to d5. Black's doing the same thing. Technically, black is still playing the symmetrical English. So, for example, bishop e3, knight c7. At this point, we have to do something drastic. Black was trying to play b5. We prevented it with a4. But we've permanently weakened b4 and d4. If we allow knight e6 to be played, we will never ever play d4 until the end of the game. So now we have to play d4. Because if the knight comes to e6, then one of the knights jumps into d4, and that's strategically we lost the d4 square. So d4. cd, knight d. If they trade, we of course have to trade. Bishop d4, queen d4. And okay, I like white's position a little better, but it's really nothing major, and black played everything correctly. So there are many ways to play the Botvinnik for both sides. Again, after c4, c5, g3, black doesn't have to do black doesn't have to play the Rubinstein. They don't have to play symmetrically at all. Let's say black plays knight c6, we play bishop g2. They don't play g6. That's very uncommon, but they could choose not to do that. Let's say knight f6, knight c3, e6. Okay, this means that they are playing for d5. And we're going to have a look at that in the next chapter on e6. But always be prepared to be flexible. And one rule I would like to share about the Botvinnik system type setup. When do we play e4? I only play e4 when black plays g6 and bishop g7. And sometimes when the pawn is on c5, but black hasn't played g6 or bishop g7, it's also okay. In this particular scenario, you could play e4, but I find it really risky and I don't like it. As a general rule, if the bishop can come to c5, we never play the Botvinnik, because, of course, all the dark squares are weak. If the bishop cannot come to c5, but black hasn't played g6 and isn't going for a kingside fianchetto, I prefer not playing the Botvinnik. Okay, let's go over e6. So we go c4, they go e6. What does that mean? Well, that means two different things. They could play the Dutch, they could play the Queen's Gambit. I'm going to go over the Dutch in a separate chapter, so let's focus on the Queen's Gambit declined here. Obviously, they want to go d5. They don't have to. They could play an imzo. Let's say, okay, we play our g3 stuff. They could go knight f6 here, of course. And after bishop g2, since we haven't played d4, they are not playing the Bogord and imzo. There's no knight on c3. So now they play d5, basically going into a sort of Queen's Gambit declined against the Catalan setup. But again, we don't have a pawn on d4. So after g3, d5, bishop g2, notice that black can take the pawn. As long as the king is on e8, we can pick up that pawn straight away, and that's exactly what we're going to do. If black at this point plays dc, we just go queen a4, take the pawn back, and, you know, why did you take away from the center? Now we have a Sicilian again, basically. So after bishop g2, knight f6, if white at any point plays d4, which is definitely one of the best moves, we are in a very, very normal Catalan, and black can take on c4 going into the open, or not take, playing the close Catalan. But we're not going to do that. We're going to play knight f3. And there is a certain drawback to playing this way. Black could enter a Benoni in reverse. So at any point, black could say, okay, we're not playing the Catalan, let's go for a Benoni. When they push d4, this is going to be a very, very standard battle of black trying to play for e5, e4, and white trying to play for b4. Notice that black has played e6. So in this particular move order, when they start with e6, playing the Benoni, in my opinion, is slightly suboptimal, because you're going to play e5 at some point, and you already played e6, so technically you're 2 tempi down. So we castle, they go c5, sure, e3, we have to challenge this structure straight away. We could play a typical Benoni with d3, going into a sort of modern Benoni, but I'm not a big fan of that. I like e3, just breaking the center straight away. We could play d3 and then e3, but this is just a modern Benoni. So ed4, cd4, and d3 now. Okay, black has many moves here. If you've played against the Benoni as white, you will know that you don't want to allow this bishop to be traded off. So if I had black here, I'd go h6, but there are many, many different moves. Basically, when white plays a3, black needs to prevent b4. When black plays e5, they will have wasted another tempo, and we have to prevent e4. So our goal as white, I think, should be to trade this bishop for either this knight or this bishop, prevent e5, and prepare b4. Okay, so that's the Benoni. There's always a real danger of entering it. On the other hand, black can just continue with the normal Queen's Gambit stuff, like bishop e7, castles, castles. Okay, if they take on c4 here, once again, queen a4, and we pick up the pawn. Once they castle, if they take on c4, we don't have queen a4 because it's not check. They can just defend the pawn. So at this point, we could go d4, playing a normal Catalan, but we're going to go b3. And we're going to be playing a double fianchetto, where we've defended the c pawn and everything is safe. So something like c5, bishop b2, knight c6. Notice that again, they could go d4, entering a Benoni structure. We're going to treat it the same way. Knight c6, e3, b6, knight c3, bishop e7, cd, knight d, queen d, and d4. And I think that this is slightly favorable for white. The statistics prove it. White wins the majority of the games, and white has not a significant advantage according to the engine, but an advantage. And I think the bishops are just very strong, and white doesn't really have any issues here at all. Neither does black. Black is fine, but, you know, normal position. So against e6, we can expect, in most cases, either a Queen's Gambit declined or a Benoni. c6. As you may know, against the English, I play c6, or I have played c6 in the majority of my games. I don't anymore. We're going to do something very weird against this. Let me explain why. When someone plays 1c6 against the English, they want to go for a Slav, a semi-Slav, or a Caro-Kann. They don't wish to play 20 moves of English theory. They don't wish to play a setup you've prepared. They want you to transpose to what they like to do. So if we played g3 here, black would go d5. If we played knight c3 or knight f3 or d4 or d3 or e4, black would go d5, going into an either Caro-Kann or semi-Slav/Slav structure. So what we're going to do, we are going to play the move queen a4. Now, you might be thinking this is crazy, it's a bad move. It's not a bad move. The engine says minus 0.1. So whether it's plus 0.2 or minus 0.1 on my level, probably on your level, makes no difference at all. What matters is who understands the positions better. What does queen a4 do? Well, it prevents you from playing d5, because I'm just going to take it. So if d5 here, that's just an awful mistake, cd5. If you play queen d5, you're actually losing, or close to losing after knight c3, have to move the queen again, let's say, and look at the difference in development. I have two knights out, and black has nothing, has a pawn on c6. So basically after queen a4, d5 is unplayable. So what did we do by playing queen a4? Well, we've just prevented black from playing the only setup they know. In my case, that was true. When I played c6 against the English, I wasn't prepared for anything else. And this was played against me by Milan Yotsev, a FIDE master. I lost the game very quickly. I played a setup with e5, which is one of the best ways to play. So d6, g3, g6, bishop g2, bishop g7. Fine, I mean, black isn't really in any real danger. White doesn't have a significant advantage. In fact, it's equal or even slightly better for black. But again, we've prevented black from playing what they know best, and we only have an equal position. We're not worse. So knight c3, and there are many, many ways to play. In most cases, when you play queen a4, no theory in the world will be applicable, because black is going to struggle to come up with a plan in the first place. So that's how we deal with c6. Okay, knight f6, I'm not sure I really want to talk about, because after c4, knight f6, we are going to be transposing into one of the openings we've seen already. So g6 is the only exception. I'm going to cover that very shortly. I can actually cover it now. We can do knight f6 and g6. But if they play e6 or e5 or something else, we know what to do. One almost major exception is what if they start with knight f6 and then play c6. Now queen a4 makes no sense, because if we play queen a4, they can still go d5 because the square is defended by the knight. So in this case, we are going to have to deviate from our typical plan. And we're going to have to accept going into a Slav/semi-Slav structure. So bishop g2, d5, knight f3. Again, it's possible for black to do a lot of things. Most people are going to take on c4. If I had black here, I'd go bishop f5, always playing a reversed London. So if you want to know more about this, you can watch probably a million of my games in this exact structure. So what I like to do against bishop f5 as white, and what I dislike the most when white does it against me, when I have black here, is the move queen b3. Exploiting the biggest weakness behind the move bishop f5, the undefended b7 pawn, black is going to go queen b6, and now just d3. We don't really care about the queen trade, we would like them to trade queens. So e6, they complete their setup, and now bishop e3. This is the point. We play d3 to play bishop e3, and black has to do something with the queen. Queen c7 might be playable. Let me actually check. Yeah, it is playable. But that means that the queen has moved twice. So most people are either going to take on c4 or take on b3. Queen b3, a b3. Now the rook is active. Everything is defended. And again, we're putting pressure on the queen side. Black's best move is a6 here. After a6, we can start chasing the bishop away. We don't have to, but we could. Something like knight h4, bishop g6, maybe h3, maybe bishop d4. I'm not sure, but it's a very, very comfortable position for white. So if they play the reverse London, again, what I like to do is queen b3, d3, and bishop e3. As black, I always struggle against this. Now, as I said, most people are going to play dc4. And we're not giving away a pawn. We castle. If they play bishop e6, trying to hold on to the pawn, we go bishop g5, bishop d5, e4, h6, ed, hg, dc, knight c. Technically, we're down a pawn, but our bishops are good. The c4 pawn is kind of stranded. It's not really clear where black's going to castle, so this isn't really a big deal. Most commonly, people are going to play knight bd7 with the idea of playing knight b6 to hold on to the pawn. So after queen c2, knight b6. This doesn't really work. a4, a5, they had to prevent a5 to save the c pawn, and now knight a3. And if queen d5 now, we go knight e1. And we're going to get a structure where after bishop f5, bishop d5, bishop c2, we can throw in bishop c6, and knight takes, and we just have a significantly better structure in my opinion, because of the doubled c pawns, doubled isolated c pawns. So knight f6, if they go c6, we cannot go queen a4. Now let's go over g6. Everything else is a transposition to something we've seen before. So this could start with g6 on move 1, g6 on move 2, g6 on move 3. Okay, I keep getting disconnected. I don't know why. Okay, I think I should be fine, because everything's in a Lee chess study. So at this point, we are going to play the Botvinnik system for sure, because the bishop isn't coming to c5. When they play g6 and knight f6, you play the Botvinnik. The same goes for g6, bishop g7, or g6, d6. Knight c3 castles, e4, d6, knight g2, c5, castles, knight c6, d3, a6. We've seen this before. Rook b8, a4, we have to prevent b5. We know this. We know what's going to happen here. So against g6, we play the Botvinnik. Now, the Dutch. When we go c4 and black goes f5, they can also do that after g6 or after e6. So they could go g6, g3, f5, or they could go e6, g3, f5. It doesn't really matter. When they play f5 on move 1 or on move 2, there is a major difference compared to the normal Dutch. And the difference is that white's pawn is not on d4. And that means two things. Firstly, it's easier for black to play e5. Secondly, it's easier for white to play e4, because the pawn can come to d3. So we can challenge this pawn very, very easily. Excuse me. g3. Okay. Knight f6, bishop g2. Black has three different Dutch systems. They could play the stone wall with e6, d5, c6. They could play the classical with e6, bishop e7, or they could play the Leningrad, which is by far the most popular. Let's go over the classical first. Okay, e6, knight f3, bishop e7, castles, castles, knight c3, d6. Okay, our pawn is not on d4. We are technically up a tempo compared to the normal classical Dutch, so we can just go b4 straight away and just fight for the queen side immediately. The downside, again, black can play e5, there's no pawn on d4, but we just go a4. And we just keep rolling those pawns forward. I think this is the best way to exploit the classical Dutch. Something like knight c6, b5, knight b4, a5, just keep going. So I think this is very simple. This is our simplest English plan, but there's no opposition. We just do it. We go c4, b4, a4, and keep going. The stone wall is slightly different, but again, there is no pawn on d4, so we can play e4 and break this structure very easily. The second point is, I believe the stone wall makes very little sense against the English because one of the major assets black has is access to the e4 square when the pawn is on d4, white's pawn. In this case, they just don't have knight e4 because our pawn is on d3. So if I have black against the English and I play the Dutch, I'm not going to play the stone wall because you have a bad bishop and no good knight on e4. Black would play bishop e7 or bishop d6 here. Knight c3 castles and e4. I mean, why not? We're just destroying the center straight away. d4, d4. If fe4, we just go knight g5, going to pick up the pawn back, and black's going to be left with this dreadful isolated e-pawn. So most people aren't going to play fe4, they're going to go e5. And there's a tricky move here that has been played only twice. White won both games. Queen b3. Threatening to win this bishop, preventing the bishop on c8 from moving. And, I mean, what do? The best move by far is bishop c5. That has never been played. So bishop c5, just giving away the pawn. I mean, it makes sense. You want to prevent c4. So against the stone wall, there's really nothing to worry about. The only Dutch system that in practice works well against the English, or it could work well, is the Leningrad with g6. So knight c3, bishop g7, d3. Once again, we don't play d4. Castles, e4. We play e4. And we break the center straight away. In this case, if black doesn't do anything, we're going to take. Or play e5. So they take, we take. d6, knight g2. And notice that we're playing the Botvinnik system without the pawn on d3. We're also playing a sort of, I don't even know what to call it, Maroczy bind with the bishop there. And the difference is, we've seen this before, but this pawn was gone. Instead of the f pawn, and I think this helps us because we've traded the d pawn for the f pawn. It's going to be very easy to launch kingside attacks. Black cannot be happy with a pawn on e6. Black shouldn't put a pawn on e5. I mean, they should, but it's going to make the light square diagonals even more sensitive. We always have f4, we always have b4 unopposed. So something like, I don't know, c5, castles, knight c6, h3, again, we want to go bishop e3 and stuff, and now f4. What do? If black ever takes on f4, we play gf4. So let's say bishop e6, knight d5, queen d7, g4. And this is just an incredible attacking position. d6 is weak. We are maybe preparing to play g5. Maybe we're going to play knight g3. Maybe we're going to play, I don't know, queen c2 or queen d2 followed by rook f2, rook f1. The knight on d5 can never really be taken. If I take on f6, I'm going to win the d pawn. So you have to be careful. So I think this is by far the best way to play against the Leningrad. You go d3, you go e4 straight away, preventing black from having their fun. And finally, this may be my new favorite weapon against the English. I've actually played it in my last English game, b6. I called it the attempt to enter the Queen's Indian, but you could also say it's an attempt to enter the Dutch. And most importantly, it aims to prevent g3 from white. If white goes g3 here, Then black goes bishop b7, and white is forced to go knight f3, after which black just gives up the bishop, ruins white's pawn structure, and plays for the central squares. So we're not going to go g3 here. Other than preventing g3, black wishes to play a sort of Nimzo/Dutch system where they fight for the e4 square. I'll just make stupid moves for white to show you what black is trying to do. So okay, this is black's ideal setup. Everything is guarding the e4 square. The bishop, the knight, and this bishop is preventing, same as in the Spanish, preventing knight c3, guarding e4. So it's basically a Nimzo-Dutch hybrid if black is given a free hand to do whatever they want. I'm going to delete this from the repertoire so that you're not confused. So we go knight c3 as white. They go bishop b7. And now what I like to do is I like to challenge the e4 square straight away. So e4. And after e6, there are many lines in which black is going to play f5. And if you play knight f3, f5 could come. If you play d4, f5 could come, or bishop b4. So just a normal move like d4 runs into bishop b4. Now you have to start defending. It's not easy to defend that pawn. So what we're going to do here is knight f3. For now, f5 doesn't work. They go bishop b4. We want to take the pawn, bishop d3. And now we're safe. If they go knight f6, we go queen e2. If they go knight e7, we castle. And again, we're playing our, well, not standard position because there's no bishop on g2, but we're going to play a different type of idea. And the idea will be a kingside attack. We want to move the bishop to c2, advance the pawn to d4, then push with e5 and play for knight g5 or bishop g5 and queen h5. So, for example, bishop c2, f5, black needs to see counterplay, e4 defending, bishop c3, or you could take either way, but I prefer dc3, bishop e4, fe4, queen e4. Okay, this is what black gets if they have counterplay. If they don't do anything, let's say they play d6, they want to go knight d7. d4, knight d7, we might be able to play rook e1, or we even might be able to play e5 straight away. I like e5. Let's see what the engine says. The engine says knight a4, okay, or knight e2. But our idea will eventually be to bring all of our pieces to the king side. I like rook e1 because there's rook e3 and transferring the rook to the king side as well. So in most cases, when black doesn't play f5, seeking counterplay straight away, you're going to play for these two bishops pointing at the king, basically. This is a major asset. We're going to change strategies from attacking the queen side to putting pressure on the king side. Okay, so this is the simple English repertoire I wanted to share with you. Again, you can find all the theory on everything I was talking about in the 10 or so videos listed below. The repertoire is available in PGN form and on Nocti. It's all in the description. And let me know what you think. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye-bye.